Alright, I think this is part 10 of the ancient fragments. And in the last part, we left off like right here on this paragraph. And we went over like the colonies of Danaan, the Temple of Saturn in West Africa, and really interesting topics. And honestly, it's kind of like these types of things aren't really brought up today. Like, I've never ever heard of the clans of Danaan in any of my like general studies and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to kind of get this new perspective, and even here too, like between the Brahmins and the Hermanes or Germains or whatever these people are called. This is some sort of like schism event. I'm not really too sure, but last episode I was trying to explain that this is basically, I think these might be like Buddhists or people who like kind of like separated from the Brahmin culture that stayed in India, and that this is some sort of migration period, or maybe one of, I wouldn't say many, but quite maybe just a few migration periods out of India with some very ancient knowledge. I'm not really too sure, but this word kind of just, the only thing I can conjure up or sum up what this word is trying to imply is that they are like Buddhists, or like those who like kind of went outside the Indian sects and kind of went to I was saying earlier, like Japan, and maybe South Asia, Indonesia, Central Asia. Like this happened like this groups and schism that occurred maybe is what well, because if we look at, like I said in my last part, looking at the Aryan migration period, which is this period that happened from like basically, they want to say northwest India, but I would say, to put it even like more into a bigger perspective, I would say Mesopotamia directly, connecting to the Aryan groups that migrated into India and kind of set up shop there, so to speak. But then after a certain time period, I think a migration period happened where people, after they settled into India, they came out of India. Some groups came out of India, maybe. It could be any group. I mean, this is just kind of like all perspective, so it's really hard to say exactly who. I'm not going to make any claims of who exactly did come out of India, but I think this is, like when it comes to Buddhism and how Buddhism spread, I think this might be a way to explain it in a sort of sense. I'd have to brush up on some of my history about Buddhism, but like just putting this all like kind of together in their time period, because obviously we have different I guess canon today, or maybe it's more like methodical or kind of put together now. Like we have the king of Ashoka. I'm pretty sure they won't talk about like India and Ashoka and those empires and stuff like that. They come much well, I guess not too much later, but I just have like a very brief understanding of like the history of India. Same thing with South Asia too. I haven't really dove too deep into them, not because I don't find them interesting, but I don't know. I have this weird notion that like a lot of information is kind of covered up in those lands, and like all these ancient ruins that we see there to have like a much more important history than what these people just kind of say out there is what it is, or what Westerners have kind of like compiled and kind of sanitized and put together for us to kind of like look at an academic perspective, because that's chiefly how we do it. We look at and we depend on academic sources to kind of like give us the assurance of what's out there. But that that can get corrupt, definitely. So without further ado, let me just continue where we kind of left off. I'm just gonna let's see here. We'll start off right here, because we kind of finished right here and talked about these groups. So we may doubtless recognize the predecessors of the present Brahmins and Buddhists of Hindustan. Oh, well, I guess I was kind of right in how they want to explain it. They are likewise mentioned by Clitarchus, if I forget who that is. Definitely like a Greco-Roman historian, as the Brahmanes and Brahmane. The castes of India are also described at length and have continued with some variations to the present day. The antiquity of such a division is very great, and perhaps originated at the dispersion, as it prevailed chiefly among the Ionic nations, while the Scythic tribes prided themselves upon their independence and the nobility of the whole race. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, You know, I kind of grew up in that kind of like mindset. You know, I think like a lot of Western people kind of grew up like that today, where it's a really independence type of thing. You know what I mean? You don't get passed down your class like you do in what they're explaining was. Now, when it says originated at the dispersion, is it saying like, okay, the Tower of Babel caused this? Or this happened, or this was already before, but then it just became like, I don't know, maybe not power vacuum, but kind of just like it funneled into this caste system. I'm not really sure what they're trying to, what Cory's trying to say here. Megasthenes is reputed to have been a Persian and an officer in the arm. Excuse. Okay, I'm sorry, my mouth is dry. And an officer in the army of Alexander in his expedition to India, and was employed upon several negotiations of consequence. I saw actually a book of Alexander at Barnes and Noble the other day. I actually kind of want to buy it and take a look at it now that I'm reading this book. And I mean, I know quite a bit about Alexander and like the empire he left after. I mean, as soon as he died, the empire completely fragmented. It was really just like everybody depending on him to be the great leader. Then he dies at a very young age, and complete fragmentation, power vacuuming, all that good stuff. But I'm not sure if that book will mention any of that. I don't know if it's like a contemporary work or like a autobiography or a modern rendition. I'm assuming it's like more of a modern rendition, but it could be like the histories of some sort. You know what I mean? Like I always see that book at Barnes and Noble as well. I just wish they had more books at Barnes and Noble for sale. One, you know, when I take a look at some of the history, I just see a lot of like war books being written, people from the military writing all these books and stuff, and it's just like it kind of bores me, I'll be honest. I see like a lot of World War II books, and then I go to like, I don't know, the religious section and kind of like look for like some like old books maybe, or like some old ancient texts, and nothing, just like books written by like religious people and whatnot, and how the power of this thing changed their life, which is cool. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes, like, I look at the cover of the book and I'm just like, man, are these people just kind of grifting and kind of like, I don't know. I've never really read the books or am into those books, so I can't really speak on it, I guess. So, no offense to anybody who are interested in reading those, like, kind of religious books. It's like a whole, like, 4 or 5 shelves, right? Of just like these like people who write books about like, I don't know. I wish I could get a picture right now, like some of the titles, but some of them are just like kind of like typical like middle-aged people just kind of writing. They're about, I don't know. I just find those books kind of funny. I never pick them up ever. I really look for ancient texts and stuff like that, but it's just funny to me. Sorry for going off on a tangent. We have a really important piece I want to read right here, actually. I have next given 2 short notices of some celebrated islands in the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. The first, upon the Atlantic island, is quoted by Proclus from the Ethiopic history of Marcellus, an illustration of the passages of Plato in the Timaeus relative to the same. Okay, so islands in the Atlantic. So it's talking about Atlantis, and then, but see, I think we were reading earlier that they put the Atlantic and the Indian, like that they were saying like the native Indians, like we're talking about lost lands, and then it was saying like, oh, they're just referring to Atlantis or like the Western islands that sunk, right? I think I remember reading that last time. So the sentence is really, really interesting now to me because I don't know, man. Like they're not. It's sometimes like the writing is not too explicit sometimes, so you kind of really have to imply. It's kind of like taking one of those SAT tests where you kind of like, you have to figure out the context clues to like figure out who they're talking about. Like I don't know, I'll say Bob went to the store and met Jim and he forgot his shoes. And it's like, okay, who's he? Is it Jim or Bob? Who forgot their shoes? You know what I mean? It's just using a pronoun he. It's kind of like you got to figure out what they're saying in that type of sense. So when it's saying like Atlantic and Indian Ocean, is he referring to like the same thing, or is he going to be talking about 2 separate things? So, and it's also saying the Atlantic island is quoted by Proclus. So I've never heard of Proclus. And the Ethiopic history of Marcellus. So these people are definitely Greco-Roman, but wow. So, and then Plato talked about this too in the Timaeus, and it's about the same stuff. But, okay, alright, so some have looked upon the relation as worthy of credit and confirmed by the broken nature of all the islands, which lie scattered between the old and the new world, regarding them as relics of a former tract which has been absorbed. The second fragment from Eumerus may relate to the islands in the Indian archipelago. What the Huh, okay, alright. Well, is he talking about Indonesia? Did they know about Indonesia? Maybe. They could just be referring to Indonesia. But I mean, obviously, many people know, like, Lemuria is what they call it. It's like this land that, or Mu. It's like this land that like sunk in the Indian Ocean, kind of like more towards like, I'd say like Indonesia. Because they say like Polynesia, or like the word Malaya, I think it means mountain. So when you say Himalaya, I forget what the prefix means, but they use prefix in Sanskrit, and a lot of these ancient languages, they have a lot of conjugations and use a lot of suffixes and prefixes for their root words. I see that in Akkadian. You kind of see it in Latin, but Latin is more of a newer word. Definitely Sanskrit. And I think that's it. Not Sumerian, I don't think they do it. And Egyptian, I'm not really too sure. I honestly have not looked too much into Egyptian. And I'd say Chinese, but I do know some Japanese. So going off of kind of Japanese and understanding kanji, I think there's no... The conjugations are kind of like... Oh, well, I guess they do kind of have conjugations, right? Because but it's more of just like no, I guess it's kind of the same, right? Because like when you say past tense, you'd say like sa, and then for present tense you'd say wa, right? Something like that. But then you'd say that, oh man, I can't recall that. I mean, I guess I can look up I don't know if I should GPT it right now. I kind of want to, but I don't really know how much people listening would really care about, you know what I mean, my claim. But I guess you can look it up, or if you know Japanese, I don't think they really use root words to kind of conjugate a lot. It's more of just like kind of using, I don't know. It's like more of an additive phrase. Maybe, is that the right word? I don't really know. I'm trying to be hypercritical with this stuff. Maybe I'm just going too far with it. Okay, so the islands in the Indian, though it is highly probable that both may refer to only the White Island of the West, so celebrated in the mythological legends of almost all nations, and in none more than the antiquities of the British Islands. Okay, yeah, I think I read that when I was like looking at through this book, but or maybe we read that in the last episode. I can't recall. When I read that, but the islands in the Indian archipelago. So I gotta look up and like kind of like see how much they're paralleling this Euhemerus. You know, let me look up. Sorry, it's not Euhemerus. It's Euhemerus. So we're gonna look up who is Euhemerus. Let's see, an ancient Greek philosopher and writer from the 4th century BCE. So it's Greek city-state time. His most famous work, Sacred History, Hiera Anagraphe. Okay, so Hiera. I feel like I've heard that word. So in Greek they put the adjective before the word itself. So hiera means sacred, right? Or maybe I'm wrong. Because anagraphe sounds like history. Anagraphe doesn't sound like sacred. Claims to describe a journey to the utopian... wait, what is this? So he said he traveled to a utopian island where he found inscriptions revealing that the gods were once historical figures. What the heck? Let me see. Okay, so is this his fragment? Does he talk? Let me see. I'm gonna ask GPT if it talks about the archipelago. Does his sacred history speak of the Indian archipelago? It says, yeah. Let's see here. Exact details are uncertain due to the work surviving only in fragments and later summaries. Oh, well, that's convenient. Just like these translations I'm doing, man. It's like there's so many fragments just broken off, you know. Who knows what they would have been saying? I feel like sometimes they might actually like be defacing their all of this stuff. I don't know. I just get the strange notion sometimes. I'm too hypercritical about that. Okay. According to Diodorus Siculus, so we've seen that in this book. This is what ChatGPT is saying, and other later writers who reference Euhemerus, he described a mythical voyage to an island called Panchaea, which was located somewhere in the Indian Ocean. Is this seriously where we get our word Pangea? No way. Huh. I think that was at the beginning of this book, actually. It was only, I just kind of looked over it. Wow. This island was said to be a preposterous and sacred land where the gods had once lived as moral rulers before being deified. That sounds a lot like Sumerian history and all their legends and stuff like that. Like the gods coming down from the whole Anunnaki story. See, that the Anunnaki story is like old Babylonian. That's not, the Anunnaki I don't think they called themselves. Oh, I'm gonna get flagged for saying that. Shoot. Oops. Well, that's what the tablets say. I'm not gonna start speculating on that stuff, but that group didn't call themselves that. They called themselves Dingir. I think I don't get flagged for saying Dingir, but yeah, according to the text, that's what they say. They didn't call themselves the A word. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, so we read all this. Okay. That was really interesting. So, I mean, this is where we get the word Pangea, I bet. Oh, that's so weird. Okay, let me see. I wish ChatGPT would give me some details, but it kind of like paraphrases and let me see if I can ask it. Can I pull up some quotes? Can you pull some quotes describing these lands? I guess from whatever sources, because it's saying that like Diodorus Siculus was saying that they reference Euhemerus. What the heck, man? It's so weird. It's just like tripping me out, you know? Finding where the word Pangea comes from. This 100% came from this whole story. That's crazy. I never learned this. Describing the land. Yeah, let me see what ChatGPT says, if I can pull some quotes from it. He didn't pull any quotes. Diodorus recounts that Panchaea was a prosperous island inhabited by various groups, including indigenous Panchaeans, Oceanites, Indians, Scythians, and Cretans. Excuse me. The island featured a notable city named Panara and a grand temple dedicated to Zeus Triphilius, situated on a high hill. Within this temple stood a golden pillar inscribed with the deeds of deities such as Uranus, Cronus, and Zeus, portraying them as the mortal rulers who were later deified. The society of Panchaea was structured into three classes: priests and artisans, farmers, and soldiers and herdsmen. Soldiers and herdsmen. The land was described as fertile, abundant in resources like gold, copper, silver, tin, and iron, and through the extractions of these metals was restricted. Wait, what? Though the extracting of these metals was restricted. Oh, what the hell? So this must have been not too long ago, because if like mining resources was like considered sacred or like off limits, that means they didn't have the freedom to do that. That means they were on a mission. That's what it seems like to me, right? I mean, think about it. You can't like, you let's say like, all right, you're allowed to like, I don't know, I guess I'm speculating on mythology. I guess this is all mythology. I guess there's no reasoning towards it. This portrayal reflects Euhemerus's rationalistic approach to mythology, suggesting that gods were originally esteemed human leaders whose extraordinary deeds led to their deification. Well, I mean, looking at it on the surface level is just kind of... I guess it's just kind of entertaining, I guess. Is that the right word? But I mean, the details of it, like 3 classes, so priests and artisans, these are probably people who kind of like, these gotta be like in the same class as like, I don't know, maybe like masons and sculptors and stuff like that. And then there's farmers, and then soldiers and herdsmen. But aren't herdsmen farmers? They're like livestock. I don't know what he means by herdsman. I'll have to read this one day. Really wish I had the time to do that. But I'm just going off of what I know and what we can find and what ChatGPT can tell us. Okay. Where are we continuing? But I merely to provide it as it were the raw materials, I shall dwell but little upon chronology. By far the most authentic record that has come down to us is the canon of Ptolemaeus. It commences from the Chaldaean era of Nabonassar and is continued to the conclusion of the reign Antoninus Pius. In calculating its chronology, however, it must be observed that although it starts from this Chaldaean era, its years are Sothoic years of Egypt, consisting of 365 days without any intercalation. Okay. Does that mean like that? Okay, so does that mean like the Gregorian calendar that we use comes from this? I mean, we use 365 days, right? Okay. So, okay, all right. Like, details like this are really important to know when you're like investigating this stuff, because like you like the Egyptians using 365 and then like the Romans using 365 is like, okay, well, like, why aren't they using the moon? Like the moon, like if agriculture was like the most important thing, I would have assumed like, you know, that would have got passed down. But it seems like Egypt is the place that started the 365 days, which but it's saying it's started from the Chaldean era, but it's like, I don't know if that's connecting to Egypt or whatnot at the same time period. But I think I'm just going to say, to save myself some headache, is that Egypt had the Gregorian calendar first in some sort of fashion before the Greeks kind of, the Romans kind of instilled that. Okay, that's interesting to note. Among the chronological fragments at the end of the work will be found the passage of Censorinus, so important in determining the celebrated epics of ancient history, and likewise an extract from Theon Alexandrinus, from the manuscripts of the King of France, partly cited by Larcher in his translation of Herodotus. For the complete extract, I beg leave to return my thanks to Mons Champollion Figeac and Mons Haz, librarian to the king. Several useful chronological passages will be found scattered over the work. Some also are collected at the end of the dynasties. I have added also 2 short notices of Saracen years of the Chaldaeans. It is remarkable that the 3 great eras of ancient history commence within 30 years of one another and are commonly fixed. Okay, so they're going based off of the Egyptian calendar, which is 365 days, so they're using a time frame that we understand. So this is where they pinpointed. The first Olympiad was 777 BC. The foundation of Rome was 750 BC. And the era of Nabonassar is 747. Okay, so so the Roman Empire formed in I think 7 or 14 AD. And then the Rome, the story of Remus and Romulus, I believe. And the mother wolf, something like that, right? So this would have been 753 BC. And the first Olympiad, I'm not really sure. I'm assuming they're talking about the first migrants into the Greek archipelago was 777 BC. And then the era of Nabonassar, which I'm assuming is obviously the Chaldeans, 747. See, but a lot of stuff was already going on in Mesopotamia. And then you had the Olympiad and the foundation of Rome, right? At the same time, Nabonassar is ruling all in those lands, and there's all this crazy stuff going on over there, just nuts. And it's nothing was going on outside of those lands, really, as far as the West is concerned. I mean, in the East, I haven't even really picked it up, to be honest. Hope I lived long enough to read much of what was going on over there at that time, truthfully speaking. I think I'm going to end it here, though. So I'm going to end on the era of Nabonassar. I'm going to kind of look into it a little bit more, because this is also very interesting to me as well. As most of this book has always been, literally every single time. It just kind of opens my mind to a lot of history that I just didn't know was there. I really didn't know this stuff was just sitting here. It's crazy. Alright, so we left off on this chronology, or this time mark right here. So we will continue in the next part.